Oh, so it's quite some time ago now that we first looked at search engine optimization. And search engine optimization is all about making it easier for the search engines and the robots that come visit your site to understand what it is your page is about. There is a notion out there that search engine optimization is about tricking the search engine into ranking your page more highly than it would otherwise deserve. And really that's not the objective. You might be able to game the system very briefly. You might be able to outsmart Google in the short term, but in the long term that's probably not very profitable. And in any event, why would you want people coming to your website under false pretenses as well? You know, if someone is looking for porn and you're selling bicycles, I mean, you know, what's the point? You know, it's not like people are going to suddenly decide, oh, I'm going to buy a bicycle. I hadn't considered that. That wasn't my plan for today, but you know, sure, now that I think of it, I'd love a bike. It's not going to happen. So there's very little point in getting traffic anyway that that isn't looking for what you have. So you need to think of more of Google like a dating service almost, matching visitors with your content. And obviously you want to make it clear then what your website is about so that Google can match you up with people. However, you also want to appear high up in Google's quality metrics. I mean, if you have two sites, if you've got, two bicycle shops and they both sell bicycles and they're both in the same city, well, one may appear much higher in the rankings than the other based on a number of factors, a number of criteria. The exact algorithms that Google might use aren't fully known, but Google has told us quite a lot already. So this is where we left things the last day, which I appreciate was quite some time ago. But these are guidelines from Google about the kinds of things you can do to help improve the ranking of your website. So you want to create unique and accurate page titles. The tags in the page are used to tell the browser how to lay out the page. But when used properly, they can also tell any machine reading the page about the structure of the document. And the title is one of the most important tags on the page because it tells someone what the page is about. So if a keyword appears in the title, well, then that keyword is going to be very closely associated with that page. So if bicycles is in the title, then there's a very, very good chance that that page has something to do with bicycles. And keywords in the title are much more valuable than keywords in the body of the document. You want to create unique title tags for each page. Personally, I'm quite lazy about doing that. I usually create a template for the site, and then very often all have the same title, which is a wasted opportunity. Because it's important to remember as well that the search engines don't really evaluate sites, they evaluate pages. And every single page is a new optimization challenge and a new optimization opportunity. So you want brief but descriptive titles. So titles are important. After that then, other tags are also important. And this goes back to some of the things you would have done in SOF 6007, where the lecturer was probably rabbiting on about the importance of using the H1 and the H2 and the H3. And they may even have mentioned the term semantic. And you see, you could lay out a web page and you could have a particular section of that, a heading, starting a new section. And you could maybe style that with a div, and then you could say, I want that div to be in bold and a particular size and a particular font. And you could also have a H2 and you could style the H2s in that particular size, in that particular style, in that particular font. And both pages would look exactly the same to a human viewer. But the use of H1 and H2 and H3 can reveal very important information about the structure of the document. So if you have a H1 at the top, that's a main heading. You may have H2s then in there, and inside those they might have H3s. And the relationship between the H3s and the H2s and the H1s can provide information about the relationship between the content. So if I have a H2 talking about bicycles, and inside that there's a H3 talking about wheels, well, we can infer a connection between the wheels and the bicycles, because the H3 is a subsection of the H2. So in that H2, this is all stuff to do with bicycles. Anything in there is going to have to do with bicycles. And if there's a H3 in there on wheels, we can figure out that's bicycle wheels we're talking about. So layout, H1, H2, those kind of tags are not just to make the page look pretty. They reveal important information about the structure. They have some meaning. That's where the term semantic comes from. Because that's very, very important. And it's especially important if your audience is a machine or if your audience is a person that's relying on a machine. It's important to have proper focus. So each individual page is going to be evaluated against what the person is looking for. And if that page looks like it's about what that person is looking for, if it's relevant to those person's search terms, then it's going to rank highly. So it's important then that you focus each page on a particular topic. So you might imagine if you have 4 different things to talk about. Let's say, so you've got 4 different topics. You might imagine if you put those 4 things on one page, well then that page is very, very useful. And you think it might rank more highly. But it turns out that if you had each of the 4 topics on separate pages, well then each page would only be about that one thing. And if someone is looking for that one thing, that page is going to rank more highly than a page that is about lots of other things. So if you're searching for information on changing a tire, changing a bicycle tire, and there's a page that's just about changing bicycle tires, it's going to rank more highly than a page that has all that information and other stuff, because the stuff about the bicycle tires has been diluted. So you might find that your 4 pages might get 2,500 hits each, for example, but the one page that has all those 4 things wouldn't end up getting 10,000. So the page that has more on it could be worse off by virtue of the fact that it's not about one specific thing, and if someone is looking for that one specific thing, that has been diluted. So you try not to dilute what it is you're talking about and keep the page about one thing. Now obviously a page with almost nothing on it isn't useful either. But you try and stay focused on a particular topic per page. Be careful with things like abbreviations. you should make sure that if you are using abbreviations, that the full version of what you're abbreviating appears at least once on every page. So if CIT had a page where the institute was just referred to as CIT and not as Cork Institute of Technology, you might think, well, sure, what harm? I mean, they've come in through the front door of CIT and got to this page, so they obviously know it's about Cork Institute of Technology. But remember, each page is going to be evaluated on its own, all by itself. So if a page about Cork Institute of Technology doesn't say Cork Institute of Technology on it, well, that's going to be a problem. Because CIT could be a great many things. Sometimes the proximity of your keywords can be important too. So if someone searches for bicycle tires, the search engine will come back with all of the pages that have bicycle and all of the pages that have tires, and it'll put all of the pages with both bicycles and tires first. But even then, that could be quite a lot, and it's going to rank them then based on various things. And the closeness of bicycle to tires in the text is a factor it's going to consider. So if your page, if someone searches for 5 keywords and your page has those 5 keywords, if those 5 keywords appear close to each other, that's going to rank a bit higher. So that's something to consider. If someone is looking for 5 keywords and your page has not only got all those 5 keywords, but has each word 3 or 4 times, then it's going to rank higher also. However, if some of the keywords appear too frequently, there might be some threshold beyond which Google thinks actually you're just taking the piss and you're trying to trick it. So if you are trying to fool Google into ranking your page very highly and getting traffic that you don't deserve, you may trigger an alarm, and it will just kind of boot you down to the back of the queue. Also, the position of the keywords on the page can be a factor. So remember, Google is scanning billions of pages, trying to get an idea of what each page is about, and archiving some of those keywords. Different search engines do things differently, but a lot of them will only index a certain portion of the page. So if your page is about how to change a bicycle tire, if you only kind of mention that at the very, very end, that point may be lost. So sometimes you can make a point and back it up, you know, with evidence and examples and illustrations. And sometimes you can start with the evidence and the examples and illustrations and then build up to your main point. From a search engine's point of view, though, by the time you get to the point, it might have gone off somewhere else. So it's important that the important keywords, the relevant keywords, appear, you know, towards the start of the page. That's assuming your page is long. So again, you shouldn't, I mean, none of this is to give you advice on designing the website for the search engine rather than the customer. That's not the way to go about it. But at the same time, when you're designing for humans, you can make it easier for the search engines. Now, so there's a description meta tag that you can use, and you can give a summary of the page. So it's possible to have a summary for each page. So that can be useful. The meta tag is problematic because it's been abused. It was overused and abused so much so that a lot of search engines just ignore it now. So there was a time, so when the meta tag came in first, the idea was that you would include keywords about the page that would have the search engine figure out what it was. But then you had people say, I mean, I would have seen examples where, you know, a service or a business in Cork would have listed in the meta tags every county in Ireland. So let's say you were looking for a bicycle shop in Cork. Well, that wouldn't have been a problem. But if you were looking for a bicycle shop in Kerry, because of the meta tag Kerry appearing in the text, well, there was no Kerry in the text, but there was Kerry in the meta tag. So if you had a bicycle shop Kerry, it would have found that shop in Cork, which really wasn't what the person was looking for. So because of that sort of abuse of the meta tag, a lot of search engines just ignore it now. Just don't bother with it. You can improve the structure of your URLs as well, and that can help too. First of all, I mean, URLs are displayed in the search results as well. So if you can put some meaning into the URL that might encourage someone to click on it once they've searched, that can help. And if you use words in your URLs, they can also help with the ranking. So if I have, you know, collinsbicycleshop.com/40712.9.html, that's not as useful as collinsbicycleshop/howtochangeabicycletire.html. So if we look at this example here, for example, where we have, you know, best albums of all time, is more meaningful than just a number. Now the contents of the pages would be the same. So you think, well, you know, if the pages is relevant, the page is relevant, then what's the problem? But if the keywords, for example, appear in the URL, well, that's going to help too, because that gives the search engine another clue, another hint as to what the page is actually really about. You should make sure too that you're only using one URL to get to your site. For example, you can often omit the www. But here if we have, you know, site.com, mypage.html, and www.site.com, mypage.html, they might get, in terms of ranking, 5,000 points each. Let's say Google had some scoring system. But you're splitting your vote. So the two of those might appear 5 pages in the search results, one after the other, because they would both be equally relevant. But Google would consider them 2 separate pages. Whereas if there was just one URL, then all of the votes would have gone for that one URL, and it might have been on the first page. So you need to be careful that you don't split your votes, so to speak. The domain name can help also, especially if it has keywords. So if someone's looking for bicycles and I've got, you know, collinsbicycles.com, well, you know, the fact that I've put the keyword in my domain name would suggest to Google that, you know, this page probably has a lot to do with bicycles. The location can also be relevant, depending on the context. So if I was selling, I don't know, handmade soap, I might have the choice of, you know, collinslovelysoap.com and collinslovelysoap.ie. If someone searched for handmade soap gifts or handmade Irish soaps the search engine may be able to associate the Irishness of the .ie with the desires of the searcher. So someone in Ireland searching for handmade soap, Google might figure out what that person is in Ireland, this business is in Ireland, so maybe I should put the two of those together. They seem like a better match than a non-geographical company that's otherwise just as relevant. So if the location of your business may be of some relevance, then you might want to opt for a .ie instead of a .com, even though it might be more expensive and inconvenient. Particularly if you're specifically interested in, say, Irish customers, or if the Irishness of your product or service is an important feature. This can even go so far as the actual hosting. So I could have, CollinsLovelySoaps.com and CollinsLovelySoaps.ie, and whichever I choose, I could probably host them with some web hosting company in Florida cheaper than I could in Dublin. But the search engine may also determine that the physical location of the website is in fact Florida and not Dublin. And so again, if the search engine felt that the physical location of the person searching was relevant, then it might rank the page located in Ireland higher than the one in Florida, say. So that not only would the .ie have an impact, but where it's actually physically hosted would also have an impact. Now, it may or may not be relevant, depending on what the person is looking for and where they are. I mean, if I just go to Google and do a search for pizza, my location is very, very, very relevant. I'm not interested in some pizza place in Dublin 6. It's no good to me. It would certainly be cold by the time it got here. So depending on the context, the person's location may or may not be relevant. And this is actually an emerging area where lots of location-based services are being developed, and location-based search is just one of those. Increasingly, search engines are able to determine physically where you are and tailor the search results to your location if it's relevant. If you do a search for JavaScript algorithms for credit card validation, well, the fact that you're in Cork is neither here nor there. Your location isn't relevant in that instance. If you're looking for legal services or accounting services, well, if you're in Ireland, services that are in Ireland are going to be more relevant to you. So it can vary. Language is also an issue. The browser may also be able to detect, or the search engine may also be able to detect that the language preferences from your browser are set to whatever. So I would have found on the logs for my blog, for example, that looking at the language preferences, you would think there were a lot of Polish people. No, you would think there are a lot of Polish people looking at my blog, and there are, but they're not in Poland. They'd be students in the class who have their browser set to Polish and English, or preference for Polish. So similarly, search engines may be able to take that into account. And if you were in Cork and your browser is set to Polish and there's a website that matches your keywords but is in Polish, it may rank more highly for you than it would for someone else. And so then we start to get into the whole area of it being customized to your experience. And of course, if you're logged into Google, then every search you've ever done and everything you've ever clicked on and lots of other information it has about you can come into play. But we're not so concerned about that when we're optimizing for the website. For search engine optimization, we're just looking at the kind of things we can do to match people that want our stuff with what we have. But certainly if your page is in French or not, it will have an impact on its visibility in the rankings in France, for example. Obviously, French people would prefer stuff in French. So if two websites have the exact same score, but one is in English and one is in French, then it goes without saying the French one would be higher. So that may or may not be a factor then, depending on the kind of thing you're doing. So you want to make the site easy to navigate. Breadcrumbs are these things where you say, you kind of show the person where they've been, well, not actually, it's not quite where they've been, but where they are in the hierarchy in the menu system. So if you have like a home page with 5 sections, and then each of those has a couple of subsections, and some of those may or may not have subsections, well, if you bury down deep in the bottom of all that, it'll show you where you are in the hierarchy, and so you can easily go back up. Should allow for the possibility of part of the URL being removed means that if I have collinsbicycle.com/bikes/rally/407.html, if a person just puts in collinsbikes/bikes/rally and no file, that they would get the page about rally bikes. Or they could just do collinsbikes.com/bikes/ and they'll get something about bikes. That they should be able to leave the end of the URL off and still get something meaningful and relevant. You should also prepare 2 sitemaps, one for the users, the humans, and one for the search engines. And the search engine sitemap is a particular format you can use. It's an XML file that tells search engines where everything is. A 404 page is what you get, or is what someone gets when they request a page on your site that doesn't exist. So that's usually happens if someone has a typo. So if I have collinsbikes.com/bikes.html, if someone types collinsbike.com, well, they won't get my site at all. But if someone does collinsbikes.com/pikes instead of bikes by mistake, the web server will say, well, that file doesn't exist, and there's a HTML file that it will show them. You want that to say more than, well, you made a mistake, feck off. That's not here. You want to offer useful information, like here's a site map, or you can search the site here, or here's a list of the main topics, whatever. You want that to be useful and meaningful, so at least they can then find what they want. It's important that your HTML or XHTML be well formed. This is a particularly frustrating thing for students of web development, because if you do the HTML wrong, most browsers will do a very, very good job of displaying the page. So even though you've done it wrong, it could still look right. And so it can be frustrating then to be told, well, it looks fine, but it's wrong. It's important for search engines that the HTML or XHTML be coded properly, because search engines are trying to separate the wheat from the chaff. They're trying to figure out, is this a quality site or not? And if the HTML is dodgy, well, that says, this isn't a serious product. This is a bit shabby. Similarly, if you have spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes, if they're detectable, that's going to put your ranking down. Because Google makes its money by giving people quality sites based on their search terms. So someone puts in their search terms, Google comes back with a front page of answers. And it's the fact that those answers are good that makes people keep coming back to Google. If you've got spelling mistakes or dodgy HTML, well, Google's probably not going to bet its reputation on your site. It's also important to make sure that the site is coded so that the HTML is there nice and clean and neat, and all the styling information is in a separate CSS file. Because if all of the styling information is in the page, then your content is going to be diluted, and the relevance of any of the content that you have relative to the size of the page is going to be less so. It can be a bit frustrating for people who want success when it comes to search engine optimization to say to them, well, if your site was any good, people will find it anyway and you will get traffic. But at the end of the day, that's true. You can use search engine optimization to help the search engine figure out what your site is about and to bring potential customers, potential readers, potential subscribers, whatever. But giving them what they want is the main business that will increase your reputation and get your traffic. So you want to write easy to read text. You want to stay organized around the topic. So try and organize each page to be about a particular topic. Create fresh, unique content. It may be useful to have regular updates to the site. A site that hasn't changed in a long time might rank a bit lower than one that has had some updates. It's important for the content to be unique. If you're going to make a website about something and you just go and you search for 20 very good pages on the web on the different topics that you're going to have, and you copy and paste the content in there, whatever about breaching, the moral and intellectual property rights of the original authors, Google isn't going to be that impressed either. Like, what is the point of a page that's just a copy of something that's already out there? It's of no value. So Google isn't going to rank you very highly. And you might say, well, how do they know I wrote it first? Well, Google knows. Do you mean, if there's anyone can figure out who wrote what first, it would be Google. So you want to create content for your users and not for the search engines. So this is sort of a caveat that goes with everything about search engine optimization. At the end of the day, you're optimizing what it is you have. You shouldn't really be changing what you have to keep the search engines happy. You should be providing useful content for your audience. So it's not quite as simple as if you build it, they will come. But if you build it properly and it's useful and has value and the search engines can figure that out about it, then they will come. Any questions on any of that? So I emailed you that document earlier in the semester, and you can read that or download it from Google. It's not the full picture of all the things you should do. Well, it's not the full picture of all the things Google does to figure out how to rank pages. It doesn't reveal that information. But it gives you some very, very good guidelines. And if you think about it, if Google had 20 pages in which to tell you things you could do, obviously it's put in those 20 pages the most important, most significant things. It'd be interesting to do an experiment. I have some crappy sites that I haven't changed in years. It'd be very interesting to take those and recode them, applying all these principles, and see does it rank much higher than it does now. I suspect it would, but I don't have the time. Any questions? Great stuff. So guys, so we won't have class on Friday, and I'll see you all again. Well, we'll see. I suppose I will see most of you anyway next week. So we're going to have class again next week. We won't have labs, and then we won't have anything in week 13. We'll be done.